Hello to all of my friends at the Watts Coalition, and thank you so much for having me here. I should also say thank you for what you do. The technologies you're developing, the technologies you're deploying are important not only to give us a more efficient, more reliable, more resilient grid, but also, frankly, to give the world a stable planet. We cannot meet our greenhouse gas targets without making our grid much more efficient than it is, without electrifying everything. And as I sometimes talk with some colleagues in the nuclear industry, we debate about what's harder to permit, a nuclear plant or transmission. I don't know, but I know that we're going to need both if we're going to actually have a zero carbon future that's fully electrified. And what you're doing makes it so much easier to make that, to help meet those goals. So thank you, thank you, thank you. On our end, I want to let you know about a couple things that we're doing to try to make your job easier. It's been a very busy season in appropriations, and I'm encouraged. I think we'll have some progress in getting some significant changes in the money we're spending in Washington next year. Worked with Congressman Scott Peters to get appropriations specifically for advanced transmission technology and dynamic line rating, so that we can actually make sure that we get money out to prioritize those things that you're doing. We led a letter to create a grid deployment office so that we actually, for the first time in our history, would actually have a branch of government responsibly for really taking a holistic approach to how we're thinking about the way we run our electric distribution and transmission system. We are pushing on FERC. We've led a letter from our office, and we're continuing to make as much noise as we can to let Order 2022 work and not give states the right to opt out of demand response programs, because my goodness, how can we make sure that we are using all tools at our disposal if we're not rewarding the value of megawatts? You all know how important those are, and we're going to continue. I think we've got some receptive ears at FERC, but we got to get them to do it. We've also worked with the Select Climate Committee that I'm on. We've put a specific request into FERC to ask them to initiate a NOPR on advanced transmission technology. And I'm really hopeful about all those things. I expect we're going to have some progress both on the appropriation side, and at FERC on those fronts. But I got to stop here and be honest. If we do all of that, if we succeed on every one of those fronts, it ain't nearly enough. And the reason it's not enough is because I know, and you know, we all know, that the barriers to actually going out and building a cleaner, more efficient, more resilient grid are at the end of the day not about technology. We know what the technologies are. I say this as a guy who built, back in my last life, I built a demand response project up at a lumber mill in northern Vermont, and it was after the forward capacity markets were introduced in New England. And I did that with about $1,000 worth of technology that we literally bought at Radio Shack. The fact that I say Radio Shack probably dates how long ago it was that I was doing that. And I remember a reporter saying at the time, what cool technology. You can remotely monitor a generator from thousands of miles away. How neat it is that you're doing that. Can you tell us what the advance was? And I said, the only difference is that they're finally paying us for it. The technology was easy. And what I think is what we really need as a society, and what I'd like to ask you all to do, is to really lean in and let my colleagues know that this is fundamentally not a development problem, it's a deployment problem. And we still have regulatory structures in our country that do not incentivize the right behavior. If you're an investor-owned utility, you earn your profits by deploying rate-based capital. That's a fantastic model to use if we're trying to build out an electric system. It was the right thing to do to electrify our country. But that traditional IOU model does not provide an economic incentive to lower your operating costs, because you got to pass those along to your ratepayers. That's a fixable problem, but it's a problem. We also know that within that far too many players who have a vote in the rules that affect RTO and ISO rules have an economic, their profit incentive is directly aligned with sitting on a congested node. We know that. And I say that as a guy who once sat on a congested node and made my bonus one year because we were sitting on a congested node. I understand those pressures. But when you look at why is it that we have these long interconnection queues? Why is it that we have so many dark money groups that are behind some of the AstroTurf objections to building out transmission line expansions? It's not because they're bad people, it's because the incentives are wrong. And seen from one lens, that's really depressing, right? It means that we're not living up to our potential as a country. It means we're paying too much for energy. It means we're deploying the wrong technologies. It means that people are having to make horrible choices between their rent and their utility bills when they shouldn't have to make that choice at all if we actually help their utility bills to go down. And that's really depressing, but it's also an amazing opportunity because it means we are sitting on this massive opportunity to have our cake and eat it too. And I'm hungry. So I need your help on that front. And I know you can do it because you've deployed the technology. And as you know, as I so often like to remind folks back home, one of the central challenges to getting policy done in Washington is that the losers always cry louder than the winners cheer. If you are benefiting from the existing status quo, if you've got a whole lot of capital tied up and investors who are expecting a return on that capital, you know exactly what you have to lose if the rules were to change. If you're someone who's going to benefit from that rule change, the entrepreneurs, the people who aren't born yet, almost by definition, you're not at the table. And yet the only way that our economy's ever really moved forward is by embracing and encouraging that entrepreneurial spirit and innovation that's the definition of what it means to be an American. So my ask for you, let us know how we can further help you. Stay tuned for further updates. But when you talk to your representative, your senator, make sure they understand that you want to go out and deploy these technologies. Make sure they understand that that you are one of the winners, and then go out and win. Thank you.